Buongiorno. Me chiamo Christian Dave is Osis, and for today's video, we will be exploring about the Italian language. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this video. In this video, it is expected that you will be encountering the Italian alphabet, the vowels and consonants, the sound pattern, the lexical categories or the grammatical unit, and the syntax or the word order of the Italian language. But before anything else, here are 10 facts that you may not know about the Italian language. Now, let's watch the video of Italian alphabet.
L'alfabeto italiano, the Italian alphabet. Today we're looking at the Italian alphabet. Why is it important that you know the alphabet? I'm assuming you're not 5 years old, or maybe you are, that would be great. But so the reason why I'm teaching you the alphabet is not because I think you should be singing the alphabet, but it's because in Italian especially, being a phonetic language, it will really help you pronounce well. So the better you are familiar with the alphabet, the better you will pronounce. So let's just get started. A. A. Ripeti. A. Yeah, I'll just get you to repeat everything, okay? So that you get the sounds. B. B. C. C. D. D. E. E. F. F. G. G. H. H. I. I. L. L. Which way you say it? I don't know. L. M. M. N. N. O. O. Look at my mouth. O. P. P. Q. Q. R. R. Don't worry about the R. S. S. T. T. U. U. V or V. Z. Z. Okay, so I'm gonna repeat it at a much faster pace. What I would like you to do is to say it with me. So don't wait for me to say, just say it with me as the letters appear on the screen. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V or V, Z. Perfetto, benissimo. So what are the letters that we don't have? Well, by now you've noticed. So we don't have K. K. Another one that we don't have is J or I lunga. We used to call it I lunga, now you can say J. I lunga or J. Now we also don't have, which one don't we have? We don't have this one, which is X. 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 And how about this one? Well, that's W, W, or if you prefer, W, W. And finally, we also don't have this one, which is Y, Y or Y, Y, Greek I. Okay, so what does it mean that we don't have them? It just simply means that Italian words don't include it unless they are foreign words which have entered the Italian language, where there's plenty of them. So we know what they are, we just don't use them. So for example, if I were to spell my name, I would say E-M-A-N-U-E-L-E. And how would you spell your name? Do you know how to do that? Okay, perfetto. That's it for this first video on the Italian alphabet. I encourage you to go on to the second and third video of this mini-series because we're going to look at something pretty unique, and that's how Italians spell their words, which is not the way you would think. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.
Now, let's proceed to the Italian consonants and vowels.
Italian has 22 consonants. And if you speak English, 14 of these are relatively familiar sounds and familiar symbols. 4 will be relatively familiar sounds with unfamiliar symbols, and 4 more will really be new for you. We'll be starting with 9 really straightforward sounds and symbols. There's B as in balena, F as in filo, G as in gonna, M as in molla, N as in nido, S as in sasso, Z as in sbarbarsi, V as in volo, and W as in uovo. Next, let's cover 5 familiar symbols that sound a little different than you're used to. We'll start with what looks like a D and a T. There's D as in dinosauro and T as in tuta. Now if you're comparing these consonants in English and Italian, you can try comparing Italian's D with English's D. Now if you pay close attention, you'll notice that in the English word, the very tip of your tongue hits your alveolar ridge, that ridge right behind your front upper teeth. D. But in Italian, the tip of your tongue flattens out a bit, so that the tip of your tongue actually touches your upper teeth, and the blade of your tongue, that part right behind the tip, touches your alveolar ridge. That gives you a less percussive sound. You get D instead of D. It's exactly the same for Italian's T. Instead of T, you get D, and that puff of air you get when you say t, t, T is also gone. You get t, t, D. So let's move on to 2 more consonants that also don't have big puffs of air in Italian. The first is P as in pane, and the second is K as in carne. For both of these consonants, the difference between English and Italian is all about that puff of air. In English, there's P, in Italian, B, P, B. Same with K. In English, we have ki, k, ki, and in Italian, ki, k, ki. The last of our slightly modified consonants is Italian's L. L as in lago. It is a familiar symbol in IPA. It's a lowercase l, but it sounds a bit different than it does in English. In English, when we say a name like Lee, the back and front of your tongue will both come up towards the roof of your mouth. Lee. But in Italian, only the tip of your tongue will come up, and it reaches just behind your front upper teeth. Li. So English has Li in Italian. Li. So next, let's cover 4 new symbols with mostly familiar sounds. First, this symbol, which looks like a lowercase j, is Italian's y as in fiamma, or English's you. Next, we have as in Italian's banca, or the English word bank. This is an N, but it's pronounced with the back of your tongue instead of with the front. Banca. Next up comes sh as in Italian's scimmia, or English's sheet, and then comes j as in Italian's gelato, or English's jello. You'll notice that this sound is actually a combination of 2 symbols, because it's 2 sounds stuck together. It begins with a d combined with a new symbol, j, a sound you'll find in English words like beige and garage. J. Italian has a few other combinations like these, which we'll go through now, since we've already covered all the sounds in them. First is ch, as in cibo, or English's cheese, a combination of a t and a sh. And since Italian t's don't come with that puff of air, you get ci instead of chi. And then comes ts, as in Italian's stanza, or English's cats. Again, there's no puff of air on that t, so it's stanza and not stanza. And last, there's z, as in Italian's zanzara, or English's pads. These 2 sounds in English and Italian are basically the same. At this point, we've covered most of Italian's consonants. We have 4 left that will be fairly new for English speakers. And we'll start with the 2 Italian R's. The first of these R's is usually the hardest one to pronounce. It uses a familiar-looking lowercase r as its symbol in IPA, and it's known as the trilled R. It sounds like this, r, as in birra. For this consonant, your tongue will go right up against your alveolar ridge. It will soften a bit to allow air to come through, and as that air comes through, it will vibrate your tongue up and down against that ridge. R, birra. There are a lot of tricks to producing this consonant, which you can find all over YouTube. The best one I've heard so far for pronouncing this consonant is to think the phrase Prince of Prussia while you're saying the phrase Prince of Prussia, replacing those R's with D's. And then you kind of play around until your tongue starts to cooperate. Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia. this can take days or weeks or even months. This thing can be a bit of a pain to get right. So, let's look at the next consonant, the next R. This is the tapped R, and it's usually comparatively easy to pronounce. The symbol is a sort of tiny, rounded-off R-looking curve, and it is very easy to mistake for that trilled R symbol. You're mostly looking to see if there's a little line on the top left or not, and if there's a line sticking up, it's the trilled R, and if not, you're getting R, as in barba. You know how that trilled R let your tongue flap up and down a bunch of times against your alveolar ridge? Well, this one will flap up and down just one time. It's basically a super fast D, and it's usually the first thing you get when you do that pedinsa of pedasha thing. So, our next consonant is Ny, as in gnocco. It's written like a combination of a lowercase n and j, and the International Phonetic Association chose that symbol for good reason. If you recall from earlier, the lowercase j symbol was y, as in English's you or yawn. For that consonant, the middle of your tongue raised up towards the roof of your mouth, y. For this consonant, it's the exact same motion, but the middle of your tongue doesn't just move towards the roof of your mouth, it actually touches it, stopping the airflow and forcing the air to come out your nose. Ny, gnocco. You get that quick y sound at the end as soon as your tongue moves on to pronounce the next vowel, gnocco. Our last new consonant is y, as in aio. This is basically in the exact same position as ny, as in gnocco. Your tongue is raised in the middle, it touching your hard palate. The only difference is that in this case, instead of sealing off the flow of air completely and forcing it to flow out of your nose, the sides of your tongue come down and allow air to flow in that gap between your tongue and your upper teeth on both sides of your tongue. This produces a sound that's like a combination between an and a y. Y, aio. And so those are all the consonants of Italian. Before we go through them one last time in review, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of consonant doubling. This is a huge part about what makes Italian sound Italian. So let's start with an example. The Italian word for the Pope, Papa. Now, Italian has a second word, which is very similarly spelled, which is Italian's word for baby food, Papa. So you have Papa and Papa. And you'll see that indicated in the IPA with a colon-looking thing. That colon tells you to make the preceding sound longer. So in Papa, Pope, the A is long, Papa. And in Papa, baby food, the P is long, Papa. To make a good double consonant, you should do two things. One, come off the vowel that comes before that consonant more quickly. It's not Papa, it's Papa. And two, once you start that consonant, just sit there for a moment, and then finish it. For many consonants, this means there's going to be a silent moment in the middle of your word. You have papa, leggo, and rocca. And for some other consonants, it means you're going to be sitting there humming or trilling or whatevering for a moment, as in donna, birra, and pesce. You'll notice in this last example that you don't actually see a double consonant in the spelling. For a few of Italian's consonants, notably sh as in pesce, y as in aio, and gn as in cigno, you'll automatically double those consonants whenever they show up in the middle of a word. For all other consonants, it'll be spelled out explicitly. You'll see the consonant repeated twice. And so that is all for Italian's consonants. To quickly review, we had 9 consonants with familiar sounds and symbols. There was b as in balena, f as in filo, g as in gonna, m as in molla, n as in nido, s as in sasso, z as in sbarbarsi, v as in volo, and w as in uovo. Then came 5 familiar symbols that sounded a little different than the sounds you might be used to from English. There was d as in dinosauro, articulated with the tip of your tongue against your front teeth, and then t as in tuta, articulated in that exact same spot without any big puffs of air like we have in English. And then came p as in pane, without that same puff of air, and then k as in carne, also without a puff of air. And last we had l as in lago, which was an L pronounced with only the front of your tongue. And then came a few familiar sounds with new symbols. There was y as in fiamma, as in banca, which was that N produced with the back of your tongue instead of the front, sh as in scimmia, and then 4 combinations. There was j as in gelato, ch as in cibo, made without that puff of air that we might do in English, z as in stanza, also without that big puff of air, and then z as in zanzara. and then came 4 new sounds in Italian. There was the trilled R, R as in birra, the tapped R, R as in barba, there was N as in gnocco, an N made with the middle of your tongue against the roof of your mouth, and then I as in aio, which was an L made in that exact same spot, letting the air flow over the sides of your tongue. And last we went through the idea of double consonants, like papa and donna, where the main idea is to make the preceding vowel short and to sit on that consonant for a while before moving on. And that is it for Italian's consonants. In this second video, we're going to talk about Italian's vowels. My primary goal here is to get you familiar with the IPA symbols for these vowels, and to give you a rough sense of how they fit in your mouth. Now keep in mind throughout this process that the better you learn to hear these sounds, the better you'll be able to keep track of which one is which, and the better you'll produce them. We're going to be talking a little bit about tongue placement, and so to give you a rough sense of that, try this. Compare E, and A in English, as in seat, set, and sat. You'll notice your tongue starts out high, E, goes to the middle of your mouth, and then goes down to A. So your tongue can go up and down. It can also go forward and back. Compare as in bet and as in but. Your tongue will go forward for and then pull back for bet, but. Now, if you'd like a much more in-depth discussion about vowel formation, check out some of the videos linked below. But for the beginning, that's about all you're going to need. So let's get to some Italian. Often, when you talk about Italian vowels, you'll often hear that Italian is really easy because it only has 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U, but this isn't quite true. Italian has 2 versions of that E vowel. It has E and E. It has 2 versions of its O vowel also, O and O, which brings us up to 7 vowels. So let's go through those vowels, figure out which one is which in IPA, and how to pronounce them accurately. We'll start with the easiest 2, E and U. So E shows up in Italian's isola, si, and English's si. It's basically the same across both languages unless your dialect of English actually uses 2 vowels when you say E. If you say something like si or say, you'll need to get rid of that first vowel and stick to the second, si. In both IPA and in Italian, you'll spell that with a lowercase I. Next up comes U. This shows up in Italian's uva, su, and English's su. Again, this vowel is pretty much the same across both languages, but as we just mentioned with E, some dialects of English, in fact most dialects of English, will use 2 vowels here. You'll say su, where Italian will consistently just use 1 pure U, su. Next comes A, as in abaco or fan. This vowel is similar to English's A as in father, but it's a bit more forward in your mouth. You can get a feel for that by comparing the English words fawn and fan. When you say fawn, your tongue is low and far back in your mouth. And when you say fan, your tongue moves forward. The Italian vowel A is around halfway in between those 2. Fan. Next up, we're going to look at Italian's letter E. Now, as we said, there are 2 ways to pronounce this letter, and the first is going to be familiar to English speakers. It's known as Italian's open E, e aperta, and it's effectively the same vowel you'd use in English words like red or elephant. It shows up in Italian in words like treno and caffè. In IPA, this vowel looks like a big curly E. The other E, as in freno, is known as the closed E, e chiusa. It shows up in IPA as a lowercase e, and since it's a new sound for most English speakers, we'll need to go back to tongue placement to figure out really where it is in your mouth. Remember how E was high up in your mouth and E was in the middle of your mouth? Well, E is right in between those 2, freno. That leaves us with 2 vowels left. 2 versions of the Italian O. The first of these we'll look at is the closed O as in forno. And this vowel shows up in IPA as a lowercase o, and it sounds a bit like the American English O as in so. The main difference here is that the American English variant is actually 2 vowels. You start at O, which is right where you want to be in Italian, but then you move on to so. The Italian version stays put, there's no at the end. You just say O. And so to compare them directly between Italian and English, you can try comparing phony with phony. Phony, phony. Our very last vowel is the Italian open O as in oca. In IPA, it's actually an opened up O. There's a piece missing from the side of the O. Now, in some dialects of American English, particularly those on the East Coast, you'll actually have this vowel already. You'll say it in words like caught and law, But for many of us, myself included as a Californian, we don't have this vowel natively. I personally say cot with the same vowel I use in the word cot or father. So if you need a bit of help, like me, in forming this open o sound, start with a word like done in English, this vowel. This puts your tongue right on the back of your mouth about halfway up. Now, keeping your tongue still in that position, I want you to start trying to round your lips as if you're going to say some sort of o or oo sound. Once you get your lips into a full circle, that will turn into o, o. And to compare them directly between Italian and English, English has done, in Italian, don, done, done. And those are the 7 vowels of Italian. To quickly review, we had I as in isola, which is a familiar vowel from English. U as in uva, which was a mostly familiar vowel. Just make sure to use only a single vowel here. It's u, not u. Then came a as in abaco, which is a vowel formed all the way in the front of your mouth. Then came our open e as in treno, which is the same as our familiar e sound from English. The closed e as in freno, which is a vowel halfway between e and e, freno. Then came the closed o as in forno, which sounds a lot like the first half of the American diphthong, o, except instead of fo, you get fo, forno, o. And last comes the open o as in oca, which, if your dialect of English doesn't have it already, is what happens if you take the sound in done and then round your lips. O, oca. And with that, we finished all of Italian's vowels.
I have here one of the example of sound pattern using the word ciao or hello in English. As you can see here, it is CCVV or the consonant vowel because as you can see, t, sh are both consonants. A, u, ow are both vowels. Lexical categories or grammatical units of Italian language. For the information of everybody, there are 9 lexical categories of the Italian language, and those are the following. Last but definitely not the least, the syntax or the word order of the Italian language. Let's watch and learn.
Word order refers to the order in which words are structured to form a sentence in a given language. Consider the English sentence, I ate an apple. But first, let's remove the article an here for simplicity. So we're just left with I ate apple. The basic word order for English is subject, verb, object, or SVO for short. If we break down the English sentence, I ate apple, we can see that the subject I is presented first, followed by the verb ate, and then finally the object apple is positioned last. This is the basic word order for sentences in English.
Now, let's compare that same sentence, I ate an apple, in Italian. Io ho mangiato una mela. Like before, let's remove the article to keep it simple, so we are just left with the words. If we break down the Italian sentence, we get the subject io, meaning I, then comes the verb ho mangiato, meaning ate, and finally we have the object mela, meaning apple. The basic word order for Italian then is SVO. It's the same as English.
This means that you can convert an English sentence into Italian simply by replacing the English words with Italian words, and you'll still be understood.
Italian word order, however, is much more flexible than English. If we swapped the subject and object around, we'd get apple ate I in English, which changes the meaning of the sentence completely. In Italian, however, the core meaning of the sentence does not change. It would still essentially be I ate apple. Mela ho mangiato io.
As you can see, the word order of Italian is quite flexible. More often than not, if you wanted to say, I ate an apple in Italian, you would not say,
Io ho mangiato una mela.
instead, you would more likely say, ate an apple in Italian.
Ho mangiato una mela. This is because Italian is a null subject language where the word for the pronoun is omitted because it's already implied.
This is because all of the information can be derived from the way the verb is conjugated in the sentence.
For example, the verb aprire means to open. When you conjugate it, it changes according to the subject. Hai aperto la scatola means you opened the box. Hanno aperto la scatola means they opened the box. Let's take a look at another example. Tornare means to return. Siamo tornati a casa in treno means we return home by train. Sono tornata a casa in treno means I return home by train.
Can you see how the subject changes based on the way the verb is conjugated in the sentence?
Okay, let's move on. Negating a sentence in Italian is incredibly simple. All you have to do is to put the word non in front of the verb.
Let's go back to the original example, I ate an apple. The verb here is ate, or
Ho mangiato. In Italian, ho mangiato una mela. To make this sentence negative, simply add non before the verb ho mangiato. Non ho mangiato una mela.
if it were Carla ate an apple, it would be
Carla ha mangiato una mela. Adding non before the verb would make it negative. Carla non ha mangiato una mela. Siamo tornati a casa in treno. Non siamo tornati a casa in treno. You can create any negative sentence in Italian simply by adding non before the verb.
Asking a question in Italian is even easier than making it negative. All you have to do is simply raise the pitch at the end of a sentence to turn it into a question.
Hai aperto la scatola. Hai aperto la scatola?
No rearranging of words is needed.
Hai aperto la scatola. Hai aperto la scatola?
You can create any basic yes-no questions in Italian this way.
If you want to be a little more specific, simply add the question word in front of the question. For example, perché means why. Perché hai aperto la scatola? Quando means when. Quando hai aperto la scatola? And come means how. Come hai aperto la scatola?
Now you know how to create questions in Italian. Well done! We've covered a lot of things in this lesson, so let's recap what we've learned. In this lesson, you learned that Italian sentences can be formed using a subject, verb, object, or SVO word order. Italian tends to omit the subject if that subject is a pronoun. You make a sentence negative by adding non before the verb. To turn a sentence into a question, simply raise your pitch at the end. And if you want to be more specific, just add a question word at the beginning of the question.
That ends my video presentation about the Italian language. I hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot from it. This has been Christian Davis Osis saying thank you, keep safe, and God bless us all.